Welcome to video 13. Let's turn to the supply side. I've never been one to suggest that either the demand side or the supply side can fix the drug problem on their own. Both are important. And just as the demand side needs reform, so does the supply side. As the hard lesson makes clear, supply control is wickedly difficult, and success requires a disciplined focus on the most dangerous drug threats. For more than a century, drug control strategies were built around plant-based drugs, opium, coca, and cannabis, grown in specific regions and disrupted through eradication and interdiction. The world today is far different. Synthetic drugs have transformed the supply side of the problem, and with it, the strategies that can realistically reduce harm. So let's take a look at the challenge and what needs to change. The United States is now confronting a drug market dominated by synthetic substances. These drugs are easy to manufacture from precursor chemicals, and they require no organic crop that has to be field processed and moved north like cocaine. This reduces the opportunities to target production and the multiple vulnerable points in the supply and the cocaine supply chain. The precursor chemicals that are essential to producing synthetic drugs like methamphetamine and fentanyl usually move through global commercial systems, perhaps mislabeled to ease their transport from China to Mexico. Intercepting the precursor chemicals or the finished drugs at the border is difficult. These products move through the points of entry, hidden in cars, trucks, and trains, and sometimes going through tunnels and other ways to get across the border. No inspection system can catch every package, but that doesn't mean border enforcement is ineffective or unnecessary. Smart border security plays a critical role in generating intelligence, mapping trafficking networks, and identifying vulnerabilities within criminal organizations. Seizures are not the end goal. They are tools for understanding how trafficking systems operate, who controls them, and how they can be disrupted. At the same time, effective supply control must extend far beyond the border. Precursor chemicals, manufacturing equipment, and financial flows move through legitimate global commerce. Addressing them requires sustained international cooperation, diplomatic engagement, and regulatory coordination, especially with countries central to chemical production and distribution. The argument of this chapter is straightforward. Supply reduction still matters, but only if it adapts to the speed, scale, and complexity of today's synthetic drug markets. That requires a true defense in depth strategy, one that disrupts supply chains at multiple points, not just at the border. Border enforcement must shift from a focus on piling up seizures to intelligence-led disruption of drug cartel operations. The first change is how we think about border enforcement itself. Border security should not focus on maximizing raw seizure numbers, but rather on intelligence-led disruption of cartel operations and finances. Seizures matter, but only really when they generate information that creates a picture of the larger threat posed by each cartel. These seizures should lead to informants, controlled deliveries, financial investigations, and coordinated cases that reach well beyond individual couriers caught at the border. Arresting low-level smugglers or intercepting isolated shipments may look like progress, but by itself, they rarely weaken trafficking organizations. What does weaken them is sustained pressure on leadership structures, logistics networks, money flows, and corrupt facilitators critical for moving the drugs through the supply chain. This means using border interdiction as the front end of a broader investigations process, not as a standalone measure of success. Smart border enforcement opens doors to very useful intelligence and impactful action. Seizures should never be thought of as an end in itself, but rather the start of something far more important, truly damaging the violent drug cartels based in Mexico and harming so many Americans. The global drug control system was not built for synthetic drugs. The first international drug treaty was signed in 1909. The most recent convention was adopted in 1988, long before fentanyl and today's quick-changing synthetic drug markets existed. That's almost 40 years ago, back in the middle of the cocaine epidemic. We're now in a different era. Time to catch up to today's realities. Many chemical manufacturers in China and elsewhere will stop utilizing chemicals that have been banned internationally. This could cause a temporary disruption in supplies to the drug cartels in Mexico. However, the chemical companies will quickly identify different chemical formulas to replace the banned substances. Even a slight change creates a new unregulated substance that then has to be scheduled again a subsequent year or banned by China itself. It's a game of cat and mouse. We need to be faster to make it harder for the traffickers to get regular supplies of the chemicals they need. Unfortunately, international scheduling that only occurs once a year is far too slow. That might have been fine 40 years ago, but today it just doesn't work. At this point, incremental fixes and workarounds are no longer enough. The United States should lead an effort to negotiate a new UN drug convention, one designed specifically for the synthetic drug era, enabling faster, class-based scheduling of dangerous precursor chemicals before they spread globally. It should join with Europe, Mexico, and if they're serious about their role in combating global drug markets, China, in developing a new treaty. Of course, we also want Mexico to work hard to control the drug cartels based in their country that produce virtually all of the fentanyl and methamphetamine trafficked into and consumed within the United States. Mexico faces an extraordinary challenge. Some of the most violent and well-financed criminal organizations in the world operate there, and their products are killing Americans every day. Mexico cannot and shouldn't have to prosecute this problem alone. The United States should pursue a long-term partnership modeled on Plan Colombia, focused on vetted units, justice reform, anti-corruption efforts, port security, and financial investigations. Plan Colombia was imperfect, and its gains were not permanent, but it demonstrated the value of sustained engagement, capacity building, and shared responsibility. Finally, we must look beyond Mexico, across the Western Hemisphere. Countries are grappling with drug production, trafficking, crime, and addiction, often with far fewer resources than the United States. Many would welcome training, technical assistance, judicial support, and help building their own treatment, recovery, and alternatives to incarceration systems. Drawing on hard lessons already learned in the United States, we should help them. Modestly funded assisted programs will go a long way in building their capacity and improving bilateral and regional cooperation. The next two videos are based on the book's Chapter 10. They turn inward. They examine how to ensure that the investments and reforms proposed throughout this book actually deliver measurable results, and how government can move beyond good intentions to real accountability, performance, and outcomes. It also explores how to think about the real costs of the drug crisis and what realistic investment looks like if we're serious about saving lives. Please check out the next video. Thanks.